The little girl stood at the mirror, tears streaming down her face as she practiced her smile. "You're okay. You're okay," she whispered to herself, straightening her crooked glasses and attempting to smooth down her unruly hair. She was 8 years old, and tomorrow was school picture day. Already, she could hear the whispers and giggles that would follow her down the hallway, the same ones that had haunted her every day since first grade. That little girl was my daughter Emma, and watching her that evening changed everything I understood about love, self-worth, and the crushing weight of judgment we place upon ourselves. As I stood in the doorway of her bathroom, my heart breaking, I realized something profound. If any other child had come to me feeling this way, I would have moved heaven and earth to convince them of their beauty, their worth, their absolute right to exist exactly as. Yet here was my own daughter, inherited my own battles with self-doubt, struggling with the very same demons I had never fully conquered. How many of us in this room right now can remember a moment like that? A moment when we looked in the mirror and couldn't find a single thing to love? When was the last time you spoke to yourself with the same gentleness you'd use to comfort a friend in pain? When did you last celebrate your own small victories with the same enthusiasm you bring to cheering on your loved ones? You see, we live in a world that teaches us that self-love is somehow selfish, that putting ourselves first is an act of vanity or narcissism. We're conditioned to believe that true virtue lies in perpetual self-sacrifice, in giving until we're empty, in pushing ourselves beyond exhaustion to prove our worth. And oh, how good we've become at it. We're masters at being there for everyone else, aren't we? We know exactly what to say when a friend is doubting themselves. We can spot the unique gifts in every person we meet, except somehow when we look in the mirror. Let me share something that happened in my local grocery store, of all places, just last spring. I was standing in the produce section, carefully selecting apples, when I overheard a conversation between a mother and her teenage son. The boy had just received his report card, mostly A's, with one B in advanced chemistry. As he spoke about his grades, his voice grew smaller, his shoulders hunched forward. "I should have done better," he said. "Everyone else got straight A's." His mother's response stopped me in my tracks. She gently took the apple from his hands, looked him in the eye, and said, "If your best friend came to you with these grades, what would you say to him?" The boy thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. "I'd tell him he did amazing and that one doesn't define him." "Then why," she asked, "don't you deserve the same kindness from yourself?" That moment in the grocery store illuminated something we all need to understand. The gap between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves is often wide enough to swallow our happiness whole. We've become fluent in the language of compassion for others while speaking to ourselves in harsh dialects of criticism and judgment. Think about your closest friend for a moment. Remember the last time they came to you feeling broken, inadequate, or lost. Remember how naturally the words of comfort flowed from your lips. Remember how clearly you could see their light, even when they were convinced they were standing in darkness. Now imagine taking that same friend's hand and turning them toward a mirror, only to find your own reflection staring back. Would the words come as easily? Would the compassion flow as freely? What I've come to understand through years of watching people struggle with this disconnect is that self-love isn't just a feel-good concept for greeting cards and Instagram posts. It's not about bubble baths and scented candles, though there's nothing wrong with those things. Real self-love is a revolutionary act. It's about treating the person in the mirror with the same respect, patience, and understanding we so readily offer others. When Emma came home from school, picture day, she was beaming. Not because the photos were perfect. Her glasses were still slightly crooked, and yes, that colic had refused to stay down. She was beaming because that morning we'd had a different kind of conversation in front of the mirror. We'd practiced finding things to love. The way her eyes crinkled when she really smiled, how one front tooth was just slightly ahead of the other in the race to grow up. The fact that her unruly hair matched her uncontainable spirit. But more importantly, we talked about how she would treat a friend who was worried about picture day. She told me she would tell them they were beautiful just as they are, that their smile could light up a room, that being perfectly imperfect made them interesting. And slowly, word by word, she began to understand that she deserved every bit of that kindness. You see, somewhere along the way, Many of us internalize the idea that being kind to ourselves somehow diminishes our capacity to be kind to others, as if love were a finite resource and using some on ourselves meant less for everyone else. But I've discovered something remarkable. Self-love isn't a zero-sum game. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we learn to treat ourselves with genuine compassion, our capacity for loving others actually expands. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to be patient with others when you're well-rested? How much more generous you can be when you're not running on empty? How much more authentic your compassion feels when you're not burning with resentment? It's not coincidence. It's evidence of a fundamental truth. We cannot give from an empty well. Yet so many of us try. We wake up each morning and immediately begin the dance of depletion. We criticize our reflection, squeeze ourselves into impossible standards, and begin the day's work of being everything to everyone. We save our harshest judgments for our own mistakes while readily offering forgiveness to others for the same human stumbles. I remember sitting with a group of teachers during a lunch break in 2011. These were dedicated educators who poured their hearts into their students' success. As we talked, one of them shared how she'd spent 3 hours the previous night writing personalized notes of encouragement to every child in her class who was struggling with self-doubt. Yet when asked about her own recent achievement, completing her master's degree while teaching full-time, she brushed it off as not a big deal and immediately changed the subject. How this moment crystallized something I'd observed countless times, how easily we dismiss our own achievements while celebrating others' successes with genuine joy and enthusiasm. Why is it that we can see the extraordinary in others but insist on seeing ourselves as ordinary? When did we learn to believe that acknowledging our own worth somehow diminishes our ability to lift others up? Let's try something together right now. I want you to think of the last time you achieved something, big or small. Maybe you finally organized that cluttered closet, or completed a project at work, or simply managed to get through a difficult day without falling apart. Now imagine your best friend accomplished that exact same thing. What would you say to them? Would you minimize their achievement? Would you immediately point out all the ways it could have been done better? Or would you celebrate their success, acknowledge their effort, and express genuine pride in their accomplishment? The disparity between these two responses, how we celebrate others versus how we acknowledge ourselves, reveals a profound truth about the nature of self-love. We've somehow convinced ourselves that being our own cheerleader is an act of arrogance, while being our own critic is a virtue. But beating yourself up ever actually made you a better person? Has harsh self-criticism ever truly motivated you to lasting positive change? I once worked with a talented artist who created beautiful paintings that brought joy to countless people. Her studio walls were covered with letters from individuals describing how her art had touched their lives, helped them through difficult times, or simply made their days brighter. Yet every time she looked at her own work, all she could see were the flaws. The brushstrokes that could have been smoother, the colors that could have been more vibrant, the compositions that could have been more balanced. One day, I asked her to do something different. Instead of immediately analyzing her newest painting for imperfections, I asked her to look at it through the eyes of someone who had just discovered her work for the first time. The shift in her expression was immediate and profound. Perhaps the first time she saw what others saw, the emotion, the beauty, the raw authenticity of her work. She began to cry, realizing how much joy she'd denied herself by refusing to view her own creations with the same appreciation she so readily offered to other artists. This experience illuminates another crucial aspect of self-love: the need to step outside our own harsh internal dialogue and view ourselves through a lens of compassion and objectivity. Just as we can recognize and appreciate the unique qualities in others, we must learn to acknowledge and celebrate our own distinctive traits and contributions. Think about how you comfort a friend who's going through a difficult time. You don't berate them for their mistakes. You don't present them with a lengthy list of their shortcomings. You don't demand that they earn your compassion by first becoming perfect. Instead, you offer understanding, patience, and unconditional support. You remind them of their strength, their resilience, and their inherent worth. You hold space for their pain while gently pointing them toward it. Now imagine extending that same grace to yourself. Imagine treating your own struggles with that level of compassion. Imagine speaking to yourself with the same gentle encouragement you offer others. This isn't about lowering standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about acknowledging your humanity and treating yourself with the dignity every human being deserves. I worked with a group of healthcare professionals who epitomized this disconnect between self-care and caring for others. They would work double shifts to cover for colleagues, skip meals to spend extra time with patients, and push through exhaustion to be there for everyone who needed them. They saw this constant self-sacrifice as a badge of honor, proof of their dedication to their calling. But here's the reality they had to face. Their capacity to care for others was directly proportional to how well they cared for themselves. One nurse shared a powerful revelation. She said, "I realized I was teaching my patients about the importance of rest, proper nutrition, and stress management, while completely ignoring these principles in my own life. How can I authentically advocate for self-care when I treat myself like I'm somehow exempt from basic human needs?" Self-love isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's not a luxury. It's a foundation. Just as you must secure your own oxygen mask before helping others in an emergency, you must establish a baseline of self-compassion before you can authentically extend that compassion to others. Consider the message we send to those around us when we consistently treat ourselves with criticism and judgment. What are we teaching our children when they watch us berate ourselves in the mirror? What are we demonstrating to our friends when we dismiss their compliments and focus only on our flaws? What are we saying about human worth when we measure our own value solely by our productivity or achievements? In 2010, I met a remarkable woman who had survived a devastating loss. Her journey through grief taught her something profound about self-love. She shared how, in the depths of her pain, she realized she was treating herself with a harshness she would never direct toward another person experiencing such trauma. She was rushing her healing, judging her emotions, and demanding that she get over it. And the turning point came when her young nephew asked her simple questions. "Auntie, why are you so mean to yourself when you're hurting? When I'm sad, you always tell me it's okay to cry." From the mouths of babes, as they say. Well, this innocent observation led her to a powerful realization. She had become fluent in the language of compassion for others while remaining utterly illiterate in extending that same compassion to herself. This brings us to a critical point. What happens when we begin to treat ourselves with the same love and respect we so naturally offer to others? The transformation isn't just personal, it ripples outward, touching every relationship and interaction in our lives. When we stop being our own worst critics, we become more authentic champions for others. When we learn to forgive our own imperfections, we develop a deeper capacity for accepting others as they are. I witnessed this transformation in a corporate executive I worked with in 2011. She was brilliant at developing her team members, celebrating their successes, and helping them grow through their failures. Yet she held herself to an impossible standard of perfection. Every minor mistake became evidence of her unworthiness. Every small setback was proof that she didn't deserve her position. Her team could feel this disconnect, and it created an unspoken tension. One day, during a particularly challenging project, she made a decision that cost the company a significant amount of money. Instead of hiding it or deflecting blame, she did something revolutionary. She treated herself the way she would treat any member of her team in the same situation. She acknowledged the mistake openly, analyzed what could be learned from it, and most importantly, showed herself compassion in the process. The impact on her team was immediate and profound. They saw that it was possible to maintain high standards while still being human. They witnessed firsthand that making mistakes didn't diminish one's worth or leadership ability. By extending to herself the same grace she had always shown others, she created a culture where genuine growth could flourish. This leads us to another crucial aspect of self-love, the permission to be imperfect. How many times have you told a friend that their worth isn't determined by their productivity, their appearance, or their achievements? How often have you assured someone you love that making mistakes is part of being human? Yet when it comes to ourselves, we often operate with a different rule book entirely. I remember a conversation with a talented musician who had performed at Carnegie Hall. When asked about the experience, he could only focus on the 3 notes. He felt he'd played imperfectly in a 2-hour concert. 3 notes out of thousands. When I asked him what he would say to a student who's beating themselves up over the same thing, his perspective shifted dramatically. He realized he was holding himself to a standard of perfection he would never impose on another. This is where the real work of self-love begins. In recognizing and challenging these double standards we've created. It starts with small acts of kindness toward ourselves. It grows through daily practices of self-compassion. It flourishes when we begin to question the harsh internal narratives we've accepted as truth. Think about the words you use when you talk to yourself. Would you use those same words to someone you love? Would you dismiss their efforts so easily? Would you be so quick to judge their mistakes? Would you constantly remind them of their past failures? Would you withhold approval until they reach some arbitrary standard of perfection? In my years of working with people from all walks of life, I've noticed something remarkable. Those who learn to treat themselves with genuine love and respect don't become complacent or self-indulgent. Instead, they become more capable of authentic growth and meaningful change. Why? Because real transformation comes from a place of acceptance, not rejection. It grows from nurturing our potential, not punishing our imperfections. Consider how you encourage a child learning to walk. You don't criticize their falls. You don't berate them for their wobbly steps. You don't withhold love until they can run a marathon. Instead, you celebrate every attempt, support their efforts, and create a safe space for them to grow at their own pace. Why then do we so often deny ourselves this same nurturing approach to growth? I worked with a group of athletes who were masters at pushing their bodies to the limit, but struggled with the concept of self-compassion. They could encourage teammates through injuries and setbacks, but were merciless with themselves. One runner shared a breakthrough moment when she realized she was speaking to her recovering body with contempt rather than the care she would show a fellow athlete. She began treating her body as she would treat a cherished teammate, with respect, patience, and understanding. The result? Not only did her performance improve, but her entire relationship with her sport transformed. Self-love isn't about lowering our standards. It's about changing the way we pursue excellence. It's about understanding that we can strive for growth while still accepting ourselves exactly as we are in this moment. It's about recognizing that our worth isn't tied to our achievements, just as we don't base our love for others solely on their accomplishments. Think of someone you love deeply, a child, a parent, a friend. Does their worth in your eyes diminish when they make a mistake? Does your love for them decrease when they fail to meet a goal? Of course not. You see beyond their actions to their inherent value as a human being. You recognize that their worth isn't something they need to earn. It's intrinsic to who they are. Yet how many of us have created elaborate systems of conditions for our own worthiness? We tell ourselves we'll be worthy of love when we lose the weight, get the promotion, find the relationship, achieve the goal. We've turned self-love into a reward we must earn rather than recognizing it as the birthright it truly is. I remember working with a talented writer who had internalized this conditional approach to self-worth. She would only allow herself to feel good about her work if it received external validation. One day she shared a profound realizance. I would never tell an aspiring writer that their words only matter if they get published. I would never suggest that their story only has value if others approve of it. So why do I impose these conditions on my own creativity? This revelation led her to develop a new relationship with her writing, one based on self-compassion rather than external validation. She began treating her creative process with the same reverence she encouraged in other writers. The result wasn't a decline in the quality of her work, as she had feared. Instead, freed from the crushing weight of self-judgment, her writing became more authentic, more vulnerable, and ultimately more powerful. These stories bring us to a crucial understanding about the nature of self-love. It's not just about feeling good about ourselves. It's about creating a foundation of internal support that allows us to face life's challenges with resilience and grace, When we treat ourselves with the same love we give others, we develop an inner sanctuary that remains steady even when the outside world becomes chaotic. I witnessed this principle in action while working with a group of parents in 2009. One mother shared her journey of realizing how her self-critical nature was affecting not just her, but her entire family. She was excellent at comforting her children through their struggles, always ready with words of encouragement and understanding. Yet her children were beginning to mirror her harsh self-judgment, applying to themselves the same unforgiving standards she used for herself. The transformation began when her 6-year-old daughter caught her criticizing her appearance in the mirror. The little girl tugged at her sleeve and said, "Mommy, when I feel ugly, you tell me I'm beautiful just the way I am. Why don't you believe it when it's about you?" This innocent question sparked a profound change. The mother realized she wasn't just teaching her children about love and acceptance. She was teaching them about self-love through her own example. This brings us to a fundamental truth that many of us overlook. Our relationship with ourselves sets the template for all other relationships in our lives. When we consistently treat ourselves with criticism and judgment, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. When we make our love conditional on achievement or perfection, we create relationships built on performance rather than genuine connection. Consider how you respond when someone pays you a compliment. Do you accept it gracefully or do you immediately deflect or diminish it? When someone expresses appreciation for something you've done, do you allow yourself to receive their gratitude, or do you rush to explain why it wasn't really that special? These seemingly small moments reveal volumes about our capacity to accept love, not just from others, but from ourselves. I once worked with a gifted teacher who could spot the unique potential in every student who entered her classroom. She had an extraordinary ability to nurture talents that others might have overlooked. Yet when it came to acknowledging her own gifts, she would quickly change the subject or redirect attention to someone else's achievements. One day, a colleague asked her a question that changed everything. "So, if one of your students had your exact same talents and contributions, what would you say to them?" The question stopped her in her tracks. She realized that if a student had created the innovative teaching methods she'd developed, had touched as many lives as she had shown the same dedication to growth and learning, she would be the first to celebrate their achievement. This awareness began a journey of learning to view herself through the same lens of appreciation she so naturally used with her students. This brings us to another crucial aspect of treating ourselves with love, the importance of celebrating our own journey. Think about how you celebrate the milestones in your loved ones' lives. You don't wait for them to achieve perfection before acknowledging their progress. You don't dismiss their small victories as insignificant. You recognize that every step forward, no matter how small, is worthy of celebration. Yet how many of us have accomplished something meaningful, completed a project, learned a new skill, overcome a fear, and immediately moved on to the next goal without taking a moment to acknowledge our achievement? How often do we brush aside our progress because we're focused on how far we still have to go? I remember working with a recovering perfectionist who had an impressive list of achievements but had never allowed herself to feel truly proud of any of them. She kept a detailed journal of her children's accomplishments, complete with photos and heartfelt notes about their growth. When I asked her if she documented her own achievements with the same loving attention, she looked startled. The idea had never occurred to her. She began keeping what she called a self-love journal, documenting her own journey with the same tenderness and attention she gave to her children's stories. She wrote about her struggles with the same compassion she would show a friend. She celebrated her victories with the same joy she brought to others' successes. Over time, this practice transformed not just how she saw herself, but how she experienced life. The practice of self-love isn't about becoming self-absorbed or narcissistic. It's about creating an internal environment of support and understanding that allows us to show up more fully in the world. When we treat ourselves with genuine love and respect, we become more capable of meaningful connection with others. Our relationships become more authentic because we're no longer seeking external validation to compensate for internal criticism. I worked with a counselor who shared a profound observation from her years of practice. She noticed that her clients who learned to treat themselves with compassion became more capable of genuine empathy for others. Rather than their self-love making them more selfish, it actually expanded their capacity for meaningful connection. Why? Because when we're not constantly battling our own inner critic, we have more emotional energy available for genuine engagement with others. It's not just about the big moments or major decisions. It's about the small, daily choices we make in how we treat ourselves. It's about the words we use when we talk to ourselves in the mirror. It's about the thoughts we allow to take up residence in our minds. It's about the standards we hold ourselves to and the grace we extend when we fall short. Think about how you comfort someone who's experiencing a difficult time. You don't demand that they immediately figure everything out. You don't expect them to have all the answers. You create a space where they can be uncertain, vulnerable, and imperfect. Yet how many of us deny ourselves this same basic kindness? How often do we demand immediate solutions from ourselves while counseling others to be patient? I remember a conversation with a hospice nurse in 2008 who spent her days helping families navigate their most vulnerable moments. She was a master at creating spaces where people could express their grief, fear, and confusion without judgment. Yet she struggled to extend this same acceptance to her own emotional landscape. One day, while sitting with a family, she heard herself say, "There's no timeline for healing. Each person's journey is unique and valid." In that moment, she realized she had never applied this wisdom to her own life experiences. This revelation led her to a deeper understanding of self-love. It's not just about the moments when we're at our best, but about how we treat ourselves when we're struggling, uncertain, or afraid. It's about creating an internal environment where all of our experiences are valid, where all of our emotions are welcome, where we don't have to earn the right to be treated with kindness. Consider how you would respond to a friend who came to you feeling overwhelmed by life's demands. Would you tell them they're being weak? Would you shame them for not having everything figured out? Would you compare their struggles to others and tell them they have no right to feel overwhelmed? Of course not. Yet, these are often the very messages we send to ourselves when we're feeling overwhelmed or uncertain. I worked with a business leader who was masterful at developing his team through challenges and setbacks. He understood that growth requires room for mistakes and learning. He created an environment where his employees felt safe taking risks and learning from failure. Yet when it came to his own growth journey, he operated with a zero-tolerance policy for mistakes. The breakthrough came when he realized that his harshness toward himself was actually limiting his ability to grow and innovate. This brings us to a fundamental principle of self-love. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about embracing our humanity. It's about understanding that our worth isn't diminished by our struggles or enhanced by our achievements. It's about treating ourselves with the same understanding and compassion we so readily extend to others. Think about someone you love deeply. When you look at them, you see beyond their surface actions to their essential worth. Their value in your eyes isn't determined by their productivity, their appearance, or their achievements. You love them not because they're perfect, but because they're authentically themselves. Now imagine extending that same unconditional positive regard to yourself. I remember working with an artist who created beautiful portraits that captured the inner light of her subjects. She had an extraordinary ability to see and celebrate the unique beauty in every person she painted. Yet when she looked in the mirror, all she could see were flaws and imperfections. One day, she decided to paint her own self-portrait using the same loving perspective she brought to her other subjects. The experience transformed not just how she saw herself, but how she understood the nature of self-love. As we draw this conversation to a close, I want to leave you with the powerful truths. The way we treat ourselves sets the template for how we experience the world. When we learn to treat ourselves with the same love we give others, we don't become selfish or self-absorbed. Instead, we become more capable of genuine connection, more resilient in face of challenges, and more authentic in our relationships. Remember Emma, the little girl I told you about at the beginning? Her journey with self-acceptance didn't end with that school picture. It continues every day, as does mine, as does yours. Each time we choose kindness over criticism, understanding over judgment, patience over perfectionism, we strengthen our capacity for self-love. The invitation before you today is simple but profound. Begin treating yourself with the same love, respect, and compassion you so naturally offer others. Start small. The next time you make a mistake, respond as you would to a friend who made the same error. When you're facing a challenge, speak to yourself with the same encouragement you'd offer a loved one. When you achieve something, celebrate it with the same enthusiasm you bring to others' successes. Remember, this journey isn't about reaching a destination of perfect self-love. It's about creating a new relationship with yourself, one kind choice at a time. It's about recognizing that you deserve the same grace, understanding, and compassion you so freely give to others. It's about understanding that true self-love isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's not a luxury. It's a foundation for living fully and loving deeply. Today, right now, you can begin this journey. You can choose to treat yourself with the same love you give others. You can decide that you deserve your own kindness, your own understanding, your own compassion. Because when you finally learn to love yourself the way you love others, you don't just transform your own life. You transform the world around you. Let your legacy be one of complete love. Love that begins with yourself and flows outward to touch every life you encounter. Let your journey be a testament to the power of self-compassion, a reminder that when we treat ourselves with love, we become more capable of creating the change we wish to see in the world. The choice is yours, and it begins anew with every breath, right? Choose love. Choose compassion. Choose to treat yourself with the same beautiful, boundless love you so freely give to others. Because you, just as much as anyone else in this world, deserve nothing less.